from the Ticats Audio Network, this is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil. And yes, I know you've been emailing us. We've been late this week, and I'm sorry. Can you not hear it in my voice? This is the reason why. Of course, this is the wrong time to get laryngitis in the end of the CFL season, but regardless, we're going to pull this off. As always, our wonderful hosts have joined us, our co-hosts have joined us, Kristina Costabile from the cfl.ca, Dan Ralph from Canadian Press, and from parts unknown, Jim Mullin, of course, from our friends out in BC, of course, Krown Countdown, and as we always know, we can get him in terms of talking about all levels of football because he is the kingpin of Football Canada. So thank you for joining us, folks.
All right. Thanks, Bubba. I think we can do some carrying for you here at that squeaky voice of yours.
Yeah, it's beyond squeaky. It's horrible. Hey, let's go back to what we've seen because we've already seen the beginning of a Tuesday game, which was unbelievable, that Elks and Argonauts game. But we'll talk about the Argonauts here. And I don't know if you want to include much of what you saw on Tuesday, but let's go back to Friday night's win over Hamilton. And I think pretty simply, Dan, we'll start with you. Have the Toronto Argonauts earn the respect as the Beast of the East?
Well, based on the standings, I'd have to say yes. They've won the games they've had to win this year, and that's the 3 against Hamilton. That wins the season series, and without that, they don't finish first. So, yeah, I would think right now, as we speak, they would have to be in that position for sure. Do I think they're the best team in the East? That's for debate.
Well, Kristina, I'll ask you that question. Are they the best?
I'm with Dan in the fact that based on the standings, yes, they're leading the league. They got 9 wins this year, and I think we all know that it's not easy to win in this league. So I'm going to give them a pat on the back for winning the games. And you're right, they've won the games that they need to as well. Those 3 games against Hamilton were super important because I think all season long, the conversation of who's going to win the East, who's the best in the East was between Hamilton and Toronto. And if you put those guys head to head, Toronto wins that series. So how do you not consider them the best in the East? And I also just want to remind everyone, they are the only team to win against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I'm not counting the Alouettes win against them last weekend because that was against some backups. But I know it was a different quarterback under center with Nick Arbuckle and not McLeod Bethel-Thompson, but that's still something to consider when no other team in the league, East or West, has been able to do that this year.
I think when you look at the Argos, you look at the entire Eastern Division. And at the start of this season, I looked at the very uneven scheduling, necessary due to COVID and travel restrictions and all of those things that have been well covered. And as much as I'm looking at a team with 9 wins, I have to wonder what their record would have looked like if we had a balanced schedule in this league, and where the Eastern Division would be if we had a balanced schedule in this league. I think the 9 wins is complimentary. I think if you listen to the small but dedicated legion of Argo fans, they are all in disbelief that this is a first-place team. And when you look at the Toronto offense and McLeod Bethel-Thompson, he's the poster boy for underachieving offenses in the Canadian Football League this year. His touchdown interception ratio is 10-13. It's like he's symbolic right now of the struggles a lot of CFL offenses are going through. At the start of the season, I wondered if the Argos could literally pull it all together with the rash of free agent signings that they had going into training camp. That has seemed to work, and it seemed to have compensated for Ryan Dinwiddie's lack of experience as a head coach. Quite frankly, he's made some mistakes along the way. I think the Argos are very beatable in the Eastern Final, regardless to what team comes up through the Eastern semifinal.
But Dan, do you not find this kind of odd that every one of you, and myself included, and we sat up in the booth for that Friday night game, and I think I'll speak for myself in the sense that when we looked at that football game, and I think about the many scenarios that could happen. What happened shocked me. It was not what I expected.
You and me both. I tweeted that and I got a lot of flack for it. I wasn't surprised that Toronto won. I thought if there was going to be a team that would win decisively, it would have been Hamilton, because I still think on paper that's the team to beat in the East. And I've been waiting for a dominant performance from the Ticats all year. I'll be honest, I still have yet to see it. Now, maybe we will see it in the East semi. Maybe we will see it in the East final. Maybe we won't see it. To Jim's point, the problems that I've seen on Hamilton's offense are the problems I've seen with a number of East Division offenses this year, maybe Montreal notwithstanding. But I'm still waiting to see a dominant Ticat performance this year, and I've yet to see it. Now, maybe they're saving it for when it means the most, but that's dangerous in the 2021 CFL season, because I don't think there are very many teams that can flip a light switch and turn it on as quick as you might think. So I was surprised that Toronto won so emphatically, and I think the score, quite frankly, flattered the Ticats, because I have never seen Jeremiah Mazzoli struggle as much in the first half as I did that game. And they tried to go deep. They obviously found something that they wanted to exploit, and they couldn't exploit it. And then in the second half, they went to a more traditional offensive performance, and he got a lot of his yards in the second half, in my mind, after the game was decided, or a lot of the game was decided anyway. So I was surprised that Toronto was so emphatic. And yet, having said that, their offensive performance, again, as to Jim's point, was not as dominant as you would expect from a first-place team.
So, Kristina, then here's the thing. If I'm an Argonaut player, I'm listening to this podcast, I'm listening to the general talk in the Canadian Football League. If as an Argonaut player, I'm saying we're still not getting any respect.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I understand why, based on the fact why we've talked about all of this. But going back to that Friday game against the Argos, I might be reaching a little bit here, but this kind of reminds me of the 2019 Grey Cup, where the week leading up, it was Hamilton heavy favorites. Everyone said Hamilton's going to win. Maybe they went in a little confident, and then they didn't show up in the Grey Cup and they were outplayed and lost. And this game, this was obviously a playoff field, a championship field game where the Ticats needed to win. And the entire week leading up, they were also heavy favorites. Look at the cfl.ca writer picks, including myself. We all chose Hamilton to win. And then they went in and they did not perform. So I don't know if there's a correlation there, if it's overconfidence, if it's game plan, if it's scheme, whatever it may be. Maybe it was Jeremiah being a human being and just not having a good day. But to me, this felt like a little bit of an overconfidence that we've seen from these same Ticats. I know it was 2 years ago, but it's still a lot of those guys that were on that 19 team are still in the building now. So that's what surprised me the most. Was I didn't think they were going to lose. I thought they were going to win, but to lose like that, it was very shocking. But maybe it was a confidence thing that they went into it feeling a little bit too good about themselves.
It's always good to get a do-over again, though, isn't it? Like for the Ticats, if they find a way to win the Eastern semifinal, they'll get a do-over against the Toronto Argonauts. And I when I look at the Argos and I look at the Ticats, they are a study in contrast in terms of how you assemble a team. I alluded to the Argos doing their giant airlift. The Ticats have stayed pat on their veteran core, and at times that core has looked a little aged, quite frankly. But I think they're primed to be a wounded bear as they enter into these playoffs, and I do think that the next time they play in Toronto, if they get that opportunity, I think Montreal will have a lot to say about that. If they do get that far, I think you'll see a very different team than what you saw on last Friday night.
But guys, let's throw this. I mean, there's an opinion out there, and it was small going into this game, that a lot of the confidence about the Tiger Cats, Jim, I'll go right to you, is that they beat teams like Ottawa. They beat teams like Edmonton, teams that are not going to the postseason. And everyone said this was the Tiger Cat team that are rolling right now. Was it a false sense of security?
Partially. At the same time, you need to show well in those games. You need to get the rhythm down with your offense in those games, and certainly over 3 games leading into that Toronto game, we saw good signs from the Hamilton Tiger Cat offense. Calgary wins those games too, right? They beat the Ottawas of the world. They beat the teams that are not headed to the playoffs. It's certainly a binary league this year in terms of contenders and non-contenders. So false sense of security. I think it's more of a work in progress, isn't it?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would agree with that probably for 8 of 9 teams this year. It's been a work in progress throughout the course of the year. I mean, I might even say all 9, because I haven't seen one team really step up and be dominant other than the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And my concern with Winnipeg now is that they're going to go, invariably, they could go into the playoffs with a 2-game losing streak and with a month off for a lot of their veterans to play. And my concern is, again, can they flip that switch come playoff time? Because they're going to have 1 game to do it.
Kristina, when you back to the Tiger Cats, and the fact here that I think that surprised a lot of people is that at times they appeared unglued. I mean, for the second week in a row, they had an ejection, not a lot of offense, defense. They got exhausted by the fourth quarter, and some are saying that Dinwiddie outcoached Coach O. Did they become unglued?
I think yes and no. I don't know about the taking the penalties and the ejections. Those things, obviously, you can ask any head coach across the league. They cannot happen. But I just think that it was one of those games. Like, to me, I look at the quarterback play, especially in that game against Toronto, where they just didn't have a good game from Jeremiah. And I think that in that instance, he looked human. And I know these guys are being paid to play professional football, so we're expecting the best from them every single week. But they're also human beings, just like the 4 of us. So just like sometimes we'll wake up on a Tuesday and it's not our day, we're stubbing our toes, we're spilling our coffee or whatever it may be, missing a deadline. It's not our day. And I think Jeremiah, in that sense, it just was not his day. So I was a little confused why he played that full game. But in terms of, I think if they have a little bit better quarterback play and stop taking some of those penalties, those ejections can't happen. The Cameron Kelly one a few weeks ago cannot happen. The Joe Bonsantos knocks cannot happen. I think that they're going to be okay, because I agree with the other two, is the sense that, like, I don't know who any of these teams in the league are this year. Every week it's like, oh, Hamilton's amazing, and then the next week they're not. Oh, BC Lions are amazing, and then the next week they're not. So I think it's really anyone's game, and it's just a matter of getting hot at the right time and heading into the playoffs.
Well, Kristina opens up a can of worms, and I don't even think she knew that she did it. And Dan, I want to go to you, because I know you're the leader of this club in the fact that Orlando did not turn to Dane Evans at any point in this ball game. And I think there was a feeling that if not for a change of pace, if not for a different look, and at the end of the game during the press conference, I had to ask the coach, didn't mean to be, so direct with him and saying, did you consider a quarterback change? And he gave me a very sharp no. Does that surprise you?
No, not at all. You and I have spoken about this here a couple of times, and I think 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I was convinced that he should have started him. I think, quite frankly, Bubba, that Dane Evans is the last bullet in the chamber. I hate to use that analogy, but he's the last change that they can make to reignite an offense. And I think that change comes either Saturday if they need a must win, or that comes in the East semi if they're struggling, or it comes in the East final when he needs a must win. I think, to me, in my mind, that's the last card he has to play offensively. And you don't want to tip your hand early, because, I mean, if he goes to Dane and Dane struggles, then what do you do? And you still got more games. I think Jeremiah, his numbers suggests that he's got a command of the offense. Not last week, notwithstanding. And I think you go with Jeremiah this week. You ride Jeremiah as far as you can. And then when you have to, you bring in Dane. And if Jeremiah makes you have to play Dane, then I think it's an easier sell to go with Dane moving forward than if you do it arbitrarily right now, because you do it now when it's the last, in my mind, it's the last card he's got to play offensively.
Well, Jim, what do you think? I mean, in BC, we saw Mr. Rourke come in there every once in a while as a change of pace. Are you surprised they're not doing the same thing as a 1 and a 1A in Hamilton with their quarterbacks?
Well, the thing is with Jeremiah Masoli is his on-again, off-again health status over the last couple of years. And if you do the math in the last 3 years, yes, we're throwing that 1 year in there where we didn't play football. He's only played 17 games. He's had 17 game situations. That's not even a full season going into a playoff round. You want to get as many reps with your number one guy as possible. You want to get him into the flow and get him comfortable with the offense as much as possible, especially in a situation like he had in Toronto with a terrible first half, to go back to a base offense and get a level of confidence back, get a level of familiarity back, especially if they're going to need to take this team through Toronto to get to the Grey Cup. So I don't have that much of an issue leaving Jeremiah Masoli in that game. And further to Dan's point, it is a card to play with Dane Evans. It is something that you do not want to tip your hand with. I will suggest that in an Eastern semifinal, or even if the game on Saturday means a lot, there's a very short leash there for Jeremiah Masoli. Maybe a quarter and another set of reps after that. And if they don't produce, then they can go to their 1A.
Kristina, my Facebook and my Twitter feed after that game for the next 2 days, it was unbelievable. That was the talk, and I didn't stimulate any of it. So I'll let people know that. But this is what people were talking about in the Hamilton and Burlington and Oakville and Niagara area, is people are saying that Dane Evans was totally disrespected by not being played in that game.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when they came back from half, I was kind of expecting maybe a quarterback change, but I thought, no, maybe let Jeremiah ride it out. He had to have time to, think about things. Maybe, again, we talked about they changed the offense a little. But heading into the fourth quarter and you're still down and Jeremiah's like, you're still not winning, why not put Dane in? I agree with these guys riding Jeremiah moving forward. But in that specific game with so much on the line and clearly your quarterback play was not good enough to get the win, why would you have not put Dane in? And it's interesting because there are obviously backups in this league that are just specifically backups. We look at Sean McGuire. That guy is a short yardage specialist, and that's it. But you look at this team, and they have a 1A and a 1B. We know Dane is good enough to be a starter in this league. We've seen it. So why would you not at least try anything, like throw a Hail Mary by putting him in there and see if he can get you anything going in that fourth quarter, especially in such an important game. But I do agree with the other two guys here that this week it's got to be Jeremiah. It's his team right now, and I don't think you sit him after one poor performance in the last month and a half.
Just one weird thing about football in Canada, and it doesn't happen in U.S. college ball, doesn't happen in the NFL, is that teams face each other 3 and 4 times a year. And a guy like Orlando Steinauer, who's been around the block in this league, knows when to hold back information. And it's really tough in this league to beat a team 3 or 4 times in a season. So why not hold back that critical information in the second half when you don't have that much of a chance to win in Toronto and save it for the playoffs? It's a strange component to football in Canada, and it happens at the pro level and it happens at the university level as well.
Well, and I'll also add, who's the most popular person in the city when your football team is losing, right? It's the number. I mean, how many times this year when Jeremiah came back after Dave Watford led the Ticats to consecutive wins. I heard people in the stands at Tim Hortons saying, "Bring back Watford." I mean, I love Dave Watford. I love what he did for those 2 starts.
Yep.
But his numbers were not good. He managed the game. He got the benefit of a solid defensive performance in both starts. But all of a sudden, the backup quarterback becomes the most popular person in the city when the starter's struggling.
And they had to rework the offense. Let's be honest here. Their offense was totally reworked under Watford than it would have been under normal circumstances.
And did the defense not get consecutive pick sixes from Simone Lawrence?
Yep.
I mean, geez, I think I could win with that.
Okay, guys, let's go out west. Jim, we'll start with you here. You look at the teams that are going to be in this Grey Cup tournament, and, I think it's obvious that, you're looking at Winnipeg hands down here as the leaders of the group. And then you start to look at everyone else. And as I think we've kind of discussed here, is that there's, I think you kind of like to call it the murky middle, I think is what you like to call it at times. Where are the Calgary Stampeders in this? Are they the sleeper group the sleeper team in this entire group of other contenders?
Well, I'm not going to get too charged up about the Stampeders because if you look at their last 3 weeks, it's almost free spot on the bingo card teams. Even though the Lions gave them a push, the Lions are nowhere near contender status. They beat Ottawa and they had a bye week. At the start of the season, I think, most of us talked about the healthiest team at the end of the day has the best chance at the Grey Cup, given the year off. And Bo Levi Mitchell started the year with a fracture that limited his ability to move around the pocket, and we saw it in an early season loss to the BC Lions. He's healthy again. That's a major plus for him. Reggie Begelton comes back. That's going to be a major plus for them. Calgary is healthy, and the last loss they suffered was a 3-pointer against Saskatchewan. There's another wrinkle in the Canadian schedule. Is that, you get enough shots at a team, you might find a way to win. So it would not surprise me, at least in the Western Final, if it's a Calgary Winnipeg Western Final. And then to Dan's point earlier, with Winnipeg possibly going in on 2 losses and sitting around for a month, there's a path there for the Calgary Stampeders.
Dan?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I don't know if that's good for Jim or not. But there's no doubt in my mind that Winnipeg's the class of the league. I mean, they've shown that they've played well. That defense is lights out. Last week, notwithstanding, and I think they become a much different team when they put their veterans in. That said, you get to what Jim said. You've had 2 weeks off. You've had a month off by the time you resume play. You're a little rusty, and if it takes you a quarter to get your mojo back, let's hope you're not down 14-0 when that happens. And nothing takes the home crowd out of it if all of a sudden, if a Calgary or a Saskatchewan goes into IG Field and jumps to a 14-0 lead, and then all of a sudden that running attack that we see Winnipeg has, it forces them to have to throw the ball. Now they're just as good, and I think Zach is the best quarterback in the league in my estimation. But you don't want to be playing catch up in a must-win situation. So, I still think the road to the Grey Cup goes through Winnipeg, and I think it's going to take a Herculean effort by either Calgary or Saskatchewan to beat that team when it's on all cylinders. I fully expect to see Winnipeg and Hamilton in the middle of December. That to me is as close to a sure bet as you're going to get in these wild and wacky playoffs.
Kristina, are you smelling an upset along the way somewhere?
Honestly, there could be. Like, back to your point about, Calgary being a sleeper, I think we kind of were sleeping on them for the first half of the season because Calgary looked mediocre. They were average. We're used to Calgary being that dynasty, that really good squad that was at the top of the West, top of the league, whatever it may be for the last, 4, 5, 6 years. And then they kind of were taken down to earth, obviously, because Bo was injured for the majority of that. But once he came back, they're getting hot at the right time. And I think that's important in this league too, is for a team, It doesn't really matter what your record is going into the Grey Cup. We've seen that before with teams that are around 500 still win the Grey Cup. So they're getting hot at the right time. And the Stamps have also been road warriors this year. I think they're 5-2 on the road. So in this case, they're going to have to win 3 games on the road to win the Grey Cup. And I don't think that it's that much of a stretch. I mean, we've talked about Reggie Begelton. We've already seen what he can do in that offense. You add Trey Roberson to that secondary. Their defense has been playing really, really great. Their defensive line has been good. So I think that there is a real possibility that they do make their way to Hamilton. I think it's going to be a tough one if they can get through, obviously, Saskatchewan, but especially against Winnipeg. But I do think that it is possible for these Stamps. We've seen them have a ton of success, especially with a healthy Bo Levi Mitchell, which I believe he is finally healthy in these last few games for them.
Let me throw you one last thing, guys. And Jim, again, we'll start with you. You're out in the West Coast, and you can give us a good feel. I guess it's 9 wins for the BC Lions in the last 2 years. What's the health of that franchise?
Well, it helps that Amar Doman has stepped up as a new local owner. I think that's key. I did see the release of their new season ticket campaign, and I see very few changes from the David Braley era, which is a bit of a concern to me. I would have hoped for a bit of a twist in terms of how they bring this team to market right now, but maybe Amar just hasn't had enough time to engage with the staff to put his footprint on things. This team's flying below the radar in this market, and a significant investment is going to have to be made in terms of bringing the presence up here. David Braley did a great job of maintaining a team. He didn't do a great job of promoting the team, quite frankly. And the team wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. But now Amar Doman has to take it to the next step. I do believe, and you referenced him, I do believe that Nathan Rourke is the future of this franchise. I think he can literally be the poster guy that they can wrap their brand around. For anyone who saw him play in the MAC with Ohio, he's got wheels. He's got a great arm. He's got a sharp mind. He's built for this game in Canada. In my mind, he's got a birth certificate that says he was born in Victoria, even though he developed his game in Oakville. And his family's moved out here. I think this is a guy that they need to push up front and center in this organization. And also Mike Riley's been a pretty good mentor to him so far through this first season. So I think there's the potential for some things to build off of. But when I look at that defense and that defensive front, they made a gamble on speed instead of size, and they lost in terms of the defensive front. There's a lot of rebuilding that needs to go on if this team's going to be competitive again.
Jim, can you do? Whoops, I was going to ask Jim, can you do that with a co-GM? Do you need a full-time GM?
That's a good question. And if you have a full-time GM, he better be on the same page as the coach. So what is the future for Rick Campbell? Is he a full-time GM? Does he step back from coaching? I think coaching is absolutely in his blood. So that's another question where I think they're going to get through this next season before they ownership draws real judgments on what the direction of this team is. I take a look at a situation in Ottawa right now where they may have to look at a GM in that city, where they better make sure that GM that comes in is on the same page as Paul LaPolice, because Lapo is going to be there as the coach, right? So either it's an internal hire or it's someone who has worked with Paul before, right, and has an understanding. That would have to be the same situation here in BC.
Kristina, do you think this team is trending up or down?
The Lions, I think they need some work. I agree with Jim. I don't know. I think it's at like a turning point right now. I think I like what they've done and added the pieces on offense, but I agree where you need to have somebody that can be marketable. And I know it's difficult in this league with like a bunch of 1-year contracts to have those guys who can be the face of a franchise anywhere. But if you look in BC, like you look at a Brian Burnham, for example, he's been there a number of years. Push that guy out to market. He's a very likable, marketable guy. I agree with Jim. If Rourke is the future, use him as the marketing. But in terms of the football, they're at a weird standstill right now. I agree. I liked their defense the first maybe like 4 games of the season, and then it just took a complete turn. So a rebuild on the defensive side of things for sure needs to happen. But I think it's a wait and see moment for the Lions right now, because I cannot tell. They were another one of those teams this year that I was like, are they good or are they bad? And I think by the end of the season, we all know where that kind of netted out, is that they were not a good football team. But where do they go from here? I'm not entirely sure. I think this is going to be a really important offseason for them, though, both behind the scenes in the front office, as we were just speaking about with the new owner, as well as on the football field, to decide what are we doing with, especially on the defense. They need some work for sure.
Yeah, the pivotal game for the Lions this year was that home game against the Edmonton Elks, where the Elks blew up that defense they just gashed them for rushing yards all over the place. And it exposed all the weaknesses, and they never seemed to recover from that one game. So if there is there's a weakness on special teams too. They're a highly inconsistent team on specials, and this is from a city that got accustomed to Louis Pasaglia kicking for 70 years here. So, that's something that people were not prepared for.
Dan, last word to you.
Well, I will jump on the bandwagon too. I think they're a team in flux right now. I like where they are at quarterback. I said all along, I think Willie Whitehead on offense presents a really nice 1-2 dynamic punch with Burnham. There's some question marks on defense. I like Jordan Williams in the middle. I think he's been a bright spot. I think the secondary's been beat up in terms of not getting any pressure up front. So, to me, the biggest question is, what do you do in the front office? I mean, Devon Claybrooks was let go in 2019 as the reason why there were issues. That team underachieved. What happened this year? Different coach, different situation, different front office, same result. I like the quarterback situation. I would keep Mike Riley for 2022 to mentor one more year with Nathan Rourke. And I agree with Jim. I think he's the face of that franchise moving forward. And you could do a lot worse in terms of somebody who's marketable and someone who's charismatic and gets it. I think the kid does get it. And but I think you have some question marks up front that have to be taken care of, both in the front office and on defense.
Well, folks, we have reached week 16. One more to go, and then the tournament begins. And as Kristina brought up, and it is so true, as you look back at the history of the Canadian Football League, anyone can win the Grey Cup. It doesn't matter. And we saw it in 2019. A team that finished 15-3 were the ones that went home as Grey Cup finalists. So we're looking forward to that. We thank you so much, Kristina Costabile from cfl.ca. Again, from parts unknown, because we don't know what goes on out west. It's Jim Mullin.
Football Island, man. It's Football Island out here.
It's usual rainy out there behind you.
Yeah, we had a couple of days of sun, and we really needed it in the interior and the valley, man. Oh, did we need it out there? But the rain's rolling in again.
And Dan Ralph, again, from CP. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Hey, watch us. This is just the beginning of all the content leading up to a huge game in Hamilton with the Rough Riders looking for seeding, looking to lock up that home playoff date. Of course, we're going to get you warmed up with all the pre-game and post-game, as we always do here on the Tiger Cats Audio Network. So please stick with us. I'm hurting Bubba O'Neil. Thank you for joining us. This has been the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network.
The CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil. Subscribe, like, and get the deepest takes on Canada's game every Monday.